Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video explores an alternate version of events and characters in a reimagined storyline. This presentation is structured and adopted into an audiobook style format with narration and visuals to enhance the experience. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the story.
Joanna took a sip of water, rolled her shoulders, and looked at her daughter. Cersei was growing into a beautiful young lady, and Joanna knew that soon enough talk of betrothals and marriage would come. For now, however, there was little thought of that. There was only thought to making sure that Cersei was the best lady that she could be. Joanna took another sip of water, put the cup down. "Tell me, Cersei, what is it you want to learn?" She could tell by the way her daughter's eyes widened that Cersei was surprised. "I'm not sure I understand, Mother," Cersei replied. Joanna felt a slight pang there. When had she become mother instead of mama? "What do you wish to learn?" "If I understood Sepulina, you are finding the lessons on dancing and sewing somewhat boring. So, what is it that you wish to learn?" Joanna asked. She could not blame her daughter for finding those lessons boring. She had as well. Cersei seemed shocked that she was actually being asked to give her opinion, and Joanna felt another pang. Had she and Tywin really created the impression that they did not want their children's views to be heard? She had promised herself that she would never allow that to happen to her children, as it had happened to her. Had she strayed so far from her thought process? Her thoughts stopped when Cersei spoke. "I'd like to know more about court etiquette, about how to hold a household together, like you do, Mother. And I want to know more about history. I can dance just fine. Everyone says so, and what good is sewing? I know how to sew. I don't need to keep doing it." In her daughter's words, Joanna heard herself, and she heard her father as well. A stubbornness and a refusal to conform to the rigid expectations that society had for them. She was at once both proud and worried. Proud because her daughter was showing herself to be a true lion, and worried because she did not know whether this would hold her in good stead for the future. Joanna brushed a strand of her daughter's hair behind her ear, and then said, "Very well. And what household things would you like to know?" She could give her household tasks, ways of managing the accounts, and bringing up her counting and arithmetic. "I want to know how to tell how much grain is needed for bread making, how much money to put aside for winter, and how to tell when we need to top up the wine stock, as well as how to tell when we need to bring in more clothes from Lysan Pentos. Those are the things that most interest me, as well as how to keep a detailed account of everything, the same way you do, Mother." Cersei replied, "Very well." Joanna stated. She clapped her hands and two servants appeared before them. "Bring me the ledgers, and bring me a spare book," she commanded. The servants bowed their heads and hurried off to get the things asked of them. As they waited for the books to be brought, Joanna turned to her daughter and said, "To tell how much of anything one needs, you must first know much of something is used on a regular basis within the castle. For example, with regards to bread, we use it every day. Roughly 20 loaves are consumed by the main household a day. This consequently means that we need somewhere in the region of 800 loaves of bread for a given moon. This means that we need roughly 300 dragons spare to pay for these loaves of bread. Now, if there are 20 people coming as part of a visit, how many loaves of bread would we need?" Joanna knew that if this was Jaime, she was asking the question of he would leap into it before thinking, but Cersei had a contemplative look on her face, one that reminded her of Eddard. A few moments passed before her daughter answered. "You would first need to know whether the visitors had bread with their meal, which meal they had bread with, and how many loaves on average they consumed. Only then could you truly know how much you would need." Joanna nodded, pleased. It was an obvious answer, but the number of lords and ladies who did not know that answer was astonishing. Her own brother Stafford had never truly known the answer. That was why he remained at the rock and not at his own holdfast. The doors opened, and the servants entered with the two books. The ledgers were marked with a golden lion and a silver snake, whilst the blank book had only a red lion on the front. Joanna opened the ledgers to the first page and saw that it was from the beginning of the year. "Come here," she said, and Cersei moved her chair closer to where Joanna had placed the book on the table. She pointed to the figures before them. These columns show the date, the amount of food consumed, the cost of the food, the amount spent for the food, and the amount left at the end of the day. At the end of each week, a total is counted and then written down. This done for every week and every moon, and at the end, a grand sum is added and presented before myself and your father. We then pay the amount due." Her daughter nodded, and Joanna said, "Have a look through the book and see what stands out to you." Her daughter moved forward and moved the book closer to herself. Joanna sat and watched as Cersei's face scrunched up in concentration. She looked a lot like Tywin when she did that. The pages crinkled slightly as they were turned, and her daughter scanned through them, looking and assessing, seeing, and yet not commenting. Eventually she stopped, and Joanna saw that she was on the page for the last week. "What is this?" Cersei asked, her finger on a sum for 200 dragons on the third day of the week. Joanna looked at the page and then sighed. "That is what we call someone spending beyond their means." She looked and saw that it was her brother Stafford who had spent the money and internally groaned. When would her brother learn? "Why is Uncle Stafford taking such a big amount of money, Mother?" Cersei asked innocently. Joanna was stuck on how to answer that question. She could not give her honest opinion that her brother was a wreck who was failing at life and doing nothing to rectify his problems. But she could not and would not coat her answer in lies. Her children deserved only the truth when it came to the extended family. Uncle Stafford is a man who likes the nice things in life, and sometimes he spends more than he really should. This is a case in point. There will be times when members of the family use more than they should, and that is when you must use the figures you have taken note of to remind them of this. Otherwise, they will not confess. Cersei nodded and then asked, "When it comes to handling the actual money used for these things, how do you not lose track of where the money is and where the money is coming from and where it is going?" Joanna chuckled. "Now that is an interesting and difficult question. You see, the money is stored within 3 secure vaults that only myself and your father know the combinations to. And in order to get access to them, we must go through a series of checks. Now once we have gone through those checks, the money itself is slowly counted out based on what is written in this ledger. And then it is placed into a series of bags and brought up out of the vault. Before payment is made, we make a note of the money being taken out of the vault." She pointed to the second column on the page. "Then we make a note of who it is being paid to." She pointed to the third column. "And finally, we make note of the amount left after payment is made." She gestured to the fourth column. "Now that seems simple, but there are times when multiple payments must be made at the same time, and therefore it becomes difficult to keep a full hold over everything that has been spent and that is being brought in. That is why we often have more than one person making note of the transactions, and then once they are complete, we ensure that the recordings of the transactions match up with each other. And if they do, then all is sorted. If they do not, then we must go through every one again until they do." Cersei's eyes had gotten as wide as saucers as Joanna had spoken, and Joanna had to chuckle once more. She remembered having a similar expression on her face when Lady Jane had explained this very process to her as well. Slowly, Cersei replied, "So, once that is done, what happens next?" "Then the books are looked over one more time and then they are filed away in a safe place," Joanna explained. Cersei nodded. "I think I understand now, Mother. Thank you." Joanna smiled. "Now I believe that you have some time to yourself for the rest of the day. I suggest you go to the library and do some reading on history if that is what you wish to learn. I shall speak to the Sepide and to the Maester to sort some new lessons for you." Cersei beamed and lunged forward to hug her. "Thank you, Mother. Thank you." Joanna chuckled and kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Of course. Now hurry along." Cersei nodded and pulled herself away before standing up and all but running out of the room. Joanna smiled as she watched her daughter go, and then she turned to one of the servants. "Bring Septalina." "Here, would you?" The servant nodded, and a few moments later, the young Septal appeared before her. "Septa, I've summoned you here because I wish to discuss my daughter's education." The Septa visibly paled, but her voice was calm. "Of course, my lady. From now on, Cersei will only have sewing lessons every third day of the week, and she will be taught more about the faith's religious theory and practices. Secondly, her dancing lessons will be done only on the 7th day of the week. The rest of the time, she will be attending lessons with Maester Crowin." Joanna said firmly. The Septa looked as if she wanted to protest, but she merely nodded and said, "Of course, my lady." Satisfied, Joanna waved a hand and said, "You can go." The Septa curtsied and then walked out of the room. As she waited for her next meeting, this time with Kevin, Joanna thought about the letter she had gotten from Damien, and the rumors he had heard about Septalina and her association with certain unsavory elements of the faith. Joanna wondered if perhaps they had made a mistake in bringing her here, but she had come highly recommended. Perhaps she was overthinking things. Regardless, she would soon know where the Septa stood on certain issues. The door opened and Kevin entered the room. He bowed and then sat down. Joanna looked at him and said, "You look exhausted. What has been happening out there? Dorna's not doing very well. I fear that this pregnancy might be the end of her. Kevin set his face haggard. There had been 3 stillbirths before this period, and Joanna knew it was starting to take a toll on Kevin and Dorna both. But Kevin knew his duty, as did Dorna. She just wished it would not kill them. I will go and see her once we are done here, Joanna said. Thank you, Kevin said simply. After a moment, Kevin spoke. I've had more information about our current problem near Tarbeck Hall. Joanna leaned forward interested. The men are sporting colors of red and black and green and silver. Colors not seen in these parts for a very long time, even before the rains, and I personally think they are meeting there to throw us off. They are discussing things that make no sense. Such as? Joanna asked. Kevin ran a hand through his hair. The rat, the hawk, and the pig, and how they need to finish their work. They talk about dragons and the shepherd from the dance as if he were still alive. They speak in riddles and nonsense. The men we have in their ranks say that their leaders are never shown, but that those who we see most often there are the fanatics, the ones who most firmly believe in whatever mission it is they believe they have been given. Joanna raised an eyebrow, but there is no identifiable mission as of yet. No, unfortunately not, Kevin replied. We cannot attack them if we do not know what it is they are talking of doing. After all, madness is not treason as much as it is against the law. We need definitive proof. You don't think they could have something to do with the Brotherhood? Joanna asked. The Brotherhood, that organization that had caused so much trouble despite not being found by anybody. That was a growing concern for Tywin, she knew. And if these people were part of that nefarious group, then she would do all she could to root them out. I do not know. It is possible yet. If that is the case, then surely we would know more about them. The Brotherhood is not as elusive as they might like to think they are, Kevin reminded her, and Joanna smiled, thinking about the 4 nobles who had been arrested in the Riverlands and executed for treason. This is true, and yet one might think that they would have slipped by now. It has been over a year, and yet they remain elusive. We must figure out who and what these people are, and then we must act. Joanna said firmly. Kevin nodded. Of course. Good, you may go now, Kevin. Go spend some time with Dorna, Joanna said. Kevin nodded his head in thanks and got up and walked out of the room. Joanna sat alone, Kevin's information playing about in her head. This group that insisted meeting at Tarbeck Hall, or the ruins of that castle anyway, must be from the Westerlands. Nobody else would know just how significant the destruction of Tarbeck Hall had been to her and Tywin. Oh, people outside the Westerlands knew about the rains, but everyone always forgot the Tarbecks. The Tarbecks had been more dangerous because they had had Lady Ellen with them, and she was always very smart. Green, red, and black, those were colors of the rat hawk and the pig. A finger up at the dragons and a hint of the dance as well. This was something that would need more searching, but she was not exactly what to search. The mentions of the shepherd were also troubling, but she was not sure why. The shepherd had become nothing more than a murmur of history, not a real person as far as the maesters could tell, though the maesters themselves could not truly be trusted. She sighed, then heard the knock at the door. Wondering who it could be, she called out, "Come in." There was a moment where nothing happened. Then the door opened and in walked Geryon, her husband's youngest brother. "Geryon," she said, smiling. "What can I do for you?" Geryon smiled, a winning smile, teeth and all. "Well, actually, I think it's more what I can do for you. And how might you do that?" she asked. Geryon was very clever, and not always smart about how he went about being clever. "Well, I think I might know one of the people who is serving in this spot of trouble in Tarbeck Hall." Geryon replied simply. "And who might that be?" Joanna asked. "Jasper Serret," Geryon said. "The same Jasper Serret who aided in the seizure of those 4 men in the Riverlands. Is he a member of the Brotherhood, then?" Joanna asked. Geryon laughed. "A great booming thing. Oh, heavens no. He's not a member of whatever the Brotherhood is, but he is a great believer in the rat, the hawk, and the pig." "Didn't he lose a brother to them?" Joanna asked. Her knowledge was somewhat sketchy on that period. Unless Geryon meant the incident that happened to cause Princess Eolora her life, in which case she could see exactly why Serret would be a member or believer. As if sensing where her thought process had gone, Geryon nodded. Not the rebels, but the others, the ones who were never found. He agreed with their principles, that the crown could never interfere in the basic right of the lords to decide who could and could not stand tall on their own right. If what I overheard is right, then Serret and his allies are planning something similar. Joanna felt something hit her then. a memory of Seret and his intimacies long ago. "Where did you hear this, Jerry?" she asked. "In the great wine cellar in Feastfire's village. Seret and a few other men, whose faces I could not see, were all there, and they were discussing their meetings and how much pleasure it would give them to see the lion jump at old ghosts," Jerian said. "Then they are planning a sham. Do you know when?" Joanna asked. "Unfortunately, I do not, but I do know that they are going to be meeting at Tarbak Hall once more in around 4 days' time. I would have men prepared and ready, if you wish to seize them," Darian said. Joanna nodded. Seizing these men would be good. It would give them a chance to learn more and perhaps figure out why an old Targaryen enemy was now coming back into play. "Thank you. You have been most helpful, Darian." Her good brother smiled. "Of course." He bowed and then left the room. Ned blinked, trying desperately to get the last vestiges of sleep from his eyes. Lord Tywin had asked for them to wake up very early this morning, and Ned was still trying to remember whether he'd brushed his teeth or not. He glanced over at Jaime and saw that his foster brother was also struggling to keep his eyes open. Ned thought about hitting him on the arm, but decided against it when Tyros Brax entered the room, smirking. Ned really didn't like Brax, and as such, thought it wise not to show any sort of emotion. Thankfully, Jaime had managed to open his eyes and straighten up as well when he noticed Brax standing there. Brax nodded to them both, and then Lord Tywin entered. As always, Lord Tywin was impeccably dressed, red and gold, and the badge of the Hand of the King showing just how powerful he was. He looked like a king, Ned thought briefly, before he pushed such treason from his mind and listened as Lord Tywin spoke. "The hour is early, I know. There is much we must discuss before you can have the chance to relax once more. And so, we shall begin immediately." Lord Tywin remained standing, his eyes roamed over them all, and Ned found himself straightening his shoulders and his back. Lord Tywin finished his assessment, and whatever conclusion he had reached, made his mouth quirk upwards into a smile briefly, before he became serious once more. "Much is happening at court. Prince Rhaegor is growing into a smart young man. A man who has much potential, and as his friends, you now must know exactly what it is that is expected of you. You must know how to identify those who are going to be of use to the prince, and those who are best kept away from him." Ned thought it a bit odd to say they were friends with the prince. Ned was more of the opinion that the prince saw him and Jaime as little brothers, people to sympathize with and instruct, not to actually share his secrets with. That was for Arthur and John Connington, and Ned found himself feeling surprisingly jealous at the thought. He pushed that thought down, and instead asked, "How will we do that, my Moor?" Other than the lessons on etiquette, he was not really sure how else they were going to tell who was being genuine and who wasn't. And even then, he was only 11 name days old. How was he supposed to tell which of the prince's more age-appropriate courtiers were really being appropriate or not? Lord Tywin looked at him, and then said, "A person's face can give away much about their intentions." Lord Tywin gestured for Titus to come forward, and the boy did so, standing before them. "Look at Titus's face when I say the following things." Ned leaned forward, curious as to what Lord Tywin would say. Even Jaime was leaning forward. "There is little money in cattle farming. Those who do it are foolish." Ned forced down a gasp. Cattle farming was a big moneymaker for the House of Brax. And then he saw the little flicker in Titus's eyes, something that was so quick, it was gone before it had time to settle. "How did he react?" Lord Tywin asked. "He got annoyed," Ned said. Brax looked at him surprised. "How do you know that?" Brax asked. "Your eyes flickered when Lord Tywin said that cattle farming was foolish. Your eyes always flicker when you're annoyed." Ned replied. "Good," Lord Taxley replied. "Now watch what happens, Taxley. I want you to say something. Only one of the things you say can be a lie. Boys, I want you to watch his face." Nod scrutinized Brax's face, intrigued. "There are only 3 men who can beat me," Brax began. "My brother Clement." His face remained expressionless. Sir Geraint fell. His face remained expressionless, though his eyebrow went up. Prince Rhaegar. Here both eyebrows shot up, but not by much. "Now, which one was the lie?" Lord Tywin asked. Ned thought about it for a second. He had seen Brax fight the prince once or twice. Both times, the prince had won. Brax had fought many others, and only Arthur had been able to beat him. Who this Sir Geraint fell was, Ned did not know, but Brax's brother Clement was younger than him, so. "Your brother Clement was the lie. What makes you say that, Eddard?" Lord Tywin asked. When he mentioned Sir Geraint and Prince Rhaegar, his eyebrows shot up. But when he mentioned his brother Clement, his face remained expressionless. I know that Clement is younger than him, and I know that Tydos has beaten almost everyone here in King's Landing other than Prince Rhaegar and Arthur Dayne. Therefore, it must be Clement that is the lie, Ned reasoned. Lord Tyrion nodded and turned to Tytos. And is he correct? Brack smiled. He is. My brother Clement is too weak to be able to beat me. Lord Tywin smiled. Very well then. Now we shall try something different. Tytus go and stand next to the boys. Brax did so, and Ned got the slight smell of something different. A woman's perfume. He wondered what that meant. Now, what I want you all to do is listen to my voice. Listen to what I say and how I say it, and see if you can detect the lie. What about your face? Yem asked. Right now my face is not important, Yame. Just listen to my voice, Lord Tywin said softly. There was a brief pause, and then Lord Tywin spoke. My name is Tywin Lannister. I am Lord of Casterly Rock, Warden of the West, Shield of Lannisport, and Hand of the King. I grew up in the Rock and in King's Landing, and when I was 8 name days old, I spilled wine on my father, Lord Tywin Lannister. When I was 10 name days old, I made the same mistake, and this time was beaten for it. When I was 12 name days old, I nearly made the same mistake, but this time stopped myself. All were silent, waiting, thinking, remembering. Ned thought through what he had heard. He did not think it was likely that Lord Tywin had ever been so careless as to spill wine on someone, let alone his Lord Father. That sounded more like something Ned himself would do. That Lord Tywin made the same mistake again was definitely unthinkable. He thought about it some more, and just as he was about to speak, Tydos answered, I think the fact that you spilled wine when you were 8 name days old is the lie, my lord. Lord Tavian's eyes sparkled then. Why do you think that? Brax blushed. Then, oh, he was very good. Because I do not think that you have ever been as clumsy as to spill something on anybody. Lord Tywin snorted. And what about you two? What do you think the lie was? I think it was that you nearly spilled wine on your father again when you were 12 name days old, Ned said. Lord Tywin gestured for him to give an explanation. And so he did. I think that perhaps the first time you spilled wine on your Lord Father was definitely an accident. I think that perhaps it was a misstep. I think the second time was deliberate. He did a quick calculation in his head and said, that was when the betrothal of Lady Jenna to Emmon Frey was announced. And so you reacted angrily. But doing it a third time, that does not suit you. Lord Tywin did not answer. Instead, he turned to Jaime and asked, and what do you think, Jaime? Jaime did not answer immediately, but when he did, his voice was thoughtful, considered. I think your claim that spilling the wine on grandfather when you were 8 name days old was a lie. Grandfather was not a very smart man, and he did many things that were wrong for the family and the Westerlands. I think you spilled wine on him to ensure he did something stupid. Besides, when you were 10, you were already a page for King Aegon. Lord Tywin smiled. You are correct. Jaime grinned. Of course. As you are my son, you are more likely to know that than Eddard or Tydos. However, the two of you were not far wrong. But you must ensure you know more about the other person than they think you know about them. The nobles of court will always try and get more from you than they will ever give you. You must listen to their voice and look at their face to see how they are phrasing and looking when they speak. Only then can you know if they are lying. But what if they are good liars? How do you know if they are lying then? Jaime asked. Lord Tywin smiled. Even the best of liars have things that give them away. Take Ser Jacaerys, for example. As Master of Whispers, it is his job to lie and to cheat and to wheel information out of people through that. However, when he tries to lie, he always looks one way and speaks the other way. It is something he has always done, and it is the way I know that he is never lying to me or the king, because he always looks and talks in the same direction. How long did it take you to figure that out, my lord? Tydos asked. Roughly 2 moons. It was easy enough with Ser Jacaerys. But there will be those who it is not so easy to tell. Lord Tywin responded. Now, there are several courtiers coming to meet me now. I want you all to attend and listen as we talk. I want you to pay attention to what they say and what they do. And when they are gone, I want you to tell me your observations. All 3 nodded and moved to their positions at the corners of the room. 5 men entered the Lord's Hall. Sir Giles Belgrave, a knight with good financial sense. Lord Miles Viprin, a proud man, and one who was good with intrigue from what Ned had heard. Then there was Lord Leyden Hightower, Lord of Old Town and foremost authority on the Citadel. The others were people that Ned had never seen before. As Ned, Jaime, and Tydos poured the wine and put the food on the table, they listened as Lord Tywin spoke. Gentlemen, welcome to the Tower of the Hand. I trust your journey was good. Lord Leighton is the most senior in rank amongst the gathered guests, spoke for them. It was a reasonable journey. Yes, there are more roadworks on the King's Road than I remember from my youth. And I believe there has been a change of the guard at the Green Hand Gate. There has been, yes. Siberlem was growing old and tired. The king thought it prudent to replace him with someone younger and stronger. Lord Tywin replied, his voice calm. Ned chanced to look from where he was standing and saw that Sir Giles Belgrave was staring at his cup with rapt fascination. They are moving in quicker than we thought. Belgrave said then, Sir, I do not think moving to that line of conversation right away is appropriate. Miles Viprin said immediately. Belgrave did not take his eyes from the cup. Why ever not? We are here to discuss important matters with the hand of the king. I think it only appropriate we discuss the most pressing concern now. What of the other matters? Financial matters, that is, the reason why we came here in the first? Viprin said. Ned looked at the two men who remained silent, nameless, their faces hidden behind something or the other. They unnerved him. I believe Sir Raids' good point, my lords. Lord Leighton said softly, we must speak on this matter now. Lord Leighton's face remained expressionless, just like Lord Tywin's, but Sir Giles looked eager, his eyes bulging, and Lord Miles looked hesitant. Then let us talk, Lord Tywin said. Sargo spoke first. I think that the arrest of Lord Serret was the smart thing to do. Such an unprecedented threat and the turn of action his group of advisors were taking was treason of the highest order. I believe that the information he has given Lady Joanna can only be of use to us. But we must find out more about where he got the original idea from. Does Lady Joanna have any more such information? Ned straightened slightly. He had heard murmurs of this, of an arrest being made, of several people dancing through the flames of truth and treason. But Grave looked as though his eyes might literally pop out of his face. Ned had to keep his hand over his mouth to stop himself from laughing. Lady Joanna has done much to try and get information from Lord Serret, other than what he had told her originally. He has said nothing more. We are trying to get more information from the others who were arrested with him. But they are simply repeating his line, the rat, the hawk, and the pig. 3 names that caused such devastation many years ago. They have returned, it seems. Ned stifled a gasp. The rat, the hawk, and the pig were dangerous people. The histories all said so. 3 men who were devoted to breaking down the social order, of destroying the very thing that the kings of the realm were trying to do, to make Westeros safe and protected from internal strife. They were fools and madmen. If they had returned, perhaps this might be something to really consider. Ned glanced at Brax and noticed that there was something strange playing in Brax's face. There was a twitch and an itch and something else as well. Ned heard the quaver in Viprin's voice. What does this mean? How do we handle that? They were everywhere the last time they were around, and nobody ever knew who they were. There were rumors, but nothing else. We cannot act on rumors. That would bring war. Lord Yexenhrumph. Ned risked a glance and saw that his face was marred in the light that looked dark. His silver hair gleamed. There won't be a war immediately. They do not have the resources nor the manpower to make such a thing happen. What I am most concerned about is whether they are linked to anyone else. As far as we have been able to gauge, they are not, Lord Tywin replied calmly. Lord Yaxara nodded, and for a brief moment, Ned was reminded of his son Baelor, called Bright Smile, for the laughter and joy he brought to people. Baelor was betrothed to Princess Alia. The two were due to marry very soon, and Ned knew Asha was quite sad about that. Then let us move on to discussing other things. Things we can control. Things such as the price of trading with Volantis. Ned was not aware that the price of trading was set here. He had always thought the Master of Coin had set the rates. Sir Giles groaned. For the love of the Seven, Leighton, we all know that the price of trading has stalled for the past year. But that's because we have an embargo on Brevos. An embargo that means that prices cannot rise or fall without someone getting screwed. Why do you keep bringing this up? There was genuine anger in Belgrave's voice, which surprised Ned. He'd have to do more reading on Belgrave. The name was familiar, but he couldn't quite say why. I bring it up because the 2 gentlemen here Hightower gestured down the table. Have some very interesting news for us. One man leaned forward and Ned nearly threw up in his mouth. The man had a face covered in pus and boils, or half his face did. His teeth were surprisingly white, though. The elephants are meeting with delegations from Bravo. They are going to try and negotiate their own private deal. That leaves Westeros on the outs. That allows the Iron Bank to send the faceless men. The second man spoke then. He remained hidden. We recommend ending the embargo now and charging higher rates for Braavosi goods, making sure that they do not forget who controls their fortunes. Otherwise, the price of trading will plummet. Ned looked at the three men. Viperon's face looked as if it had been caved in. Belgrave looked as if he wanted to scream, and Hightower, he remained neutral. He was better than Lord Tywin at this. Ned was convinced of it. Where have you gotten this information from? Lord Tywin asked. From within the elephant's circle itself. Act quickly, my lords, before Westeros is facing two enemies, one of whom it cannot hope to defeat. The two figures said before they stood up alongside Hightower and Belgrave and Viperon and walked out of the room. The ending to the meeting was sudden. It took Ned a moment to truly realize that it had ended. And then he looked at Jaime. You were daydreaming, his foster brother whispered, and Ned was not sure whether to believe him or not. He looked at Lord Tywin, but Lord Tywin remained silent and was looking through papers that had not been there before. Eventually, Lord Tywin spoke. So, what did you make of them? Viperon is too nervous. He is hiding something, Brax said. Belgrave is angry and desperate for approval, Ned said. Hightower is doing something more behind the shadows, Jaime said, and Ned was surprised to see his foster brother had been paying attention. And the other two men? Lord Casterly asked. Ned thought about the way the men had spoken and how he had supposedly lost track of time, and he said they were lying. Jaime and Brax looked at him surprised, but Lord Tywin smiled. Very good. The room was dark, the smell of shit filled the air. Joanna had to wrinkle her nose slightly to stop from vomiting. She knew the prisoner had lacked standards before, but she had never thought a noble could let themselves sink to such a level. She moved the torch to bring him into view. His hair was ragged, dark with streaks of gray. His face was battered from where he had resisted arrest, and his clothes were stained with all kinds of things. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, she heard him say in a voice that gave off the impression of defeat, but was nothing more than him mocking her. Jasper Sarrett was a proud man, as all men of the Westerlands were, the Sarretts especially. Their lands were Silver Hill, where there were copious amounts of silver mines that had made them rich beyond measure. Before they had been loyal bannermen to the Rock, but now the rot was evident, and Joanna wondered how she had ever missed it. She inhaled, coughed, and then spoke. You know why I am here. You have given us information that has proven to be useful. I wish to know why you did not give this information before, when you had a chance. Sarek cackled, but it came out sounding like a hacking cough. There never was a chance. There was only doing what they bid until I was caught. We all knew we were going to be caught. There was never any doubt to that, but we had to do it. Why? Joanna asked. You are the Lord of Silverhill. Only the Lord of the Rock and the King can make you do anything. What did these people have on you to make you forget that? Sarrett laughed again. They had nothing on me. I am not so foolish as to allow them to have something on me. But they were very persuasive. They offered me things, chances, dreams, things that your Lord husband would never have given me. And so, I took it. And once I did, there was never any returning from it. My fate was sealed, and I have accepted that. Why did you decide to tell us about the troves? Joanna asked. Sarrett had told them about the areas where the group kept their gold and their silver, the funds for their treason. They had found several chests filled to the brim, and the moment they had seized them, the activity had stopped. Sarrett looked, or rather squinted at her. What day is it? He asked. The third day of the 7th moon of the 274th year since the conquest, Joanna replied. Why did you tell us about the troves? She asked again. Sarrett inhaled and then exhaled. I told you about the troves because I wanted this thing to be over. I had grown tired of constantly moving from one place to another, of constantly having to hide in plain sight. Oh, it was fun to begin with, but I am an old man. Tired. I do not want to constantly move from one thing to another. I cannot keep track all the time, and I wanted my family to be safe. These people, they did not think straight toward the end, and so I had to make them think straight. And you think that by telling us about their troves you have done this? Joanna asked, not seeing the sense in his reasoning. People did not always respond well to losing their money. Sirit seemed to see what she was thinking, for he coughed. Money was just a part of it. They can get their money back at any time. There are plenty within the Riverlands and the Westerlands who would fund them again. No, by giving you their troves, I was giving you a way in. A way to properly see what was happening. And I take it that with your presence here, that has succeeded. So, what more do you want from me? Joanna moved the torch away from him and allowed the room to be bathed in darkness temporarily before bring it back. I want to know what happened during these meetings. I want to know who the people are that approached you. And I want to know everything else. Sirit gave another hacking cough, and this time, Joanna saw red spots appearing on his chin. Lady Joanna, always wanting to know more, always wanting everything to know, and to see, I suppose it would do no harm. Very well, I shall tell you what you want to know, but I do not think you or Tywin will like it. Sirit gave another cough, and Joanna was briefly reminded of something her father had once said to her as a child. Never let your desire for knowledge cloud your desire for sleep. She had not understood what he had meant then, but since learning of this, she had come to understand better. Her bed was calling to her, but she could not allow her desires to get in the way of her duty. Sirit finished coughing and then spoke. These people never showed their faces whenever they met me. They always wore hoods and masks. Masks of crows and plagues and animals we consider evil within the Seven. They wore these masks, and they communicated through paper, through letters and details, and through countless other things. They spoke of many things that would make your skin crawl, of breaking down the barriers of ensuring that power was with the nobility where it should be. They spoke of ensuring that the dynasties of old were not replaced by the dynasties of the new people that the crown is favoring. During the meetings we spoke of how the world was changing, and of how we were losing out. Of how the Crown and Tywin Lannister were failing in their duty to prevent the people falling behind. We spoke of how we could handle this, and of how to make the world right again. How would you make the world right again? Joanna asked, though she was sure she knew the answer. Through war. Just as we had done during the reign of Aegon the Fortunate. War would force the king and his hand to the negotiating table, and it would force them to consider what they thought was really worth fighting for. Sirit said. Joanna snorted. Did you really think that this petty little rebellion, this treason, would be enough to stop the crown from doing whatever it wanted? Prevented it from ensuring that the kingdoms were more united? Sirit exhaled, his chest expanding as he did so. We never thought it would, but we had to try. I did not think it would, but I wanted to see. I felt young, I felt alive, more so than I've ever done before. There was something to this, and I wanted to see whether it would last, but as it was, we were foolish. We did not think that the Lannisters would come rushing to clear the mess. We were stupid. We should have seen that. You never liked leaving anything undone now, did you? Joanna. Joanna bit back the retort that was forming on her lips. She knew that that was what he wanted her to do. Jasper had always been very good at baiting her. When she had been a little girl and he had been a young man, that had been one of the things that had attracted her to him at one point, before she had grown up. Now she looked at him and said, you were all fools, committing treason for something that would never happen. Now who else was there? We captured you, your brothers and your good brother. But I know there are more people out there, waiting and hiding. Who are they? Tell me and you might get off with a lighter sentence. Sirit said nothing for a moment. The crackling of the flames brought the only sound in the room. Then, with a huff and a puff, he spoke. House Bitley, House Clifton, House Streen, House Foot, House Jast, House Yarwick, and many more. But those are the houses in the Westerlands who were part of this little conspiracy. Joanna kept her face expressionless, but internally she was trying not to scream. That was a lot of houses, many more than she had first thought possible. And now, well, now they would need to act quickly. She took a breath and then spoke. Did all these houses share the same vision with one another? Did they all want to reduce the power of the crown? Sirit shook his head. No, that was never on their mind. The main power brokers wanted to reduce the power of the crown, but these houses merely joined to discuss these things, and because they were useful, Jaceda's men, some of the best fighters in the Westerlands, come from House Jast. Casterly was the one who handled the administrative side of it all. Everyone else was there for the numbers and for their own private reasons. Reasons they never shared with me, but with the power brokers. Something about the words that Sirit was using sparked something in her memory. Something she had read once as a child. She looked at him and asked, Power brokers. What do you mean? Seret did something that might have been a grin, but she wasn't sure. He coughed, blood spattered onto the floor. He wiped at his mouth, then spoke, his voice sounding like someone was eating nails. The power brokers, the ones who had done this before, they are experts in bringing disparate and warring houses into alliance with one another, against a common foe. They are experts in ensuring that nobody has too much power over the other, despite their rank and station. They are the ones who did this before, and they have come back. Joanna went over the words in her head, playing them over again, and then it came to her. The edges of a faded book, a world without end. Chaos that continued despite the king's best intentions, and how the world had cried for the death of a beautiful prince, and how Tywin had been silent throughout for days afterwards, for the loss of his master. She stared at Seret, and then whispered, "The rat, the hawk, and the pig. It is actually them. They are behind all of this." Seret smiled. "Good, you've gotten it now." "Why, how?" "I thought they were slain when Prince Daeron launched his expedition against them." Joanna asked, trying desperately to keep her voice calm. When Tywin learned that it was the trio who had taken his hero, well, he would not react well at all. They could not be killed by some fool. Even the king could not find them. King Aerys and Bloodraven could not find them. "They are returning, Joanna, and you had best be prepared for their return. For when they come, they will not stop," Seret said, something like manic pride on his face. Joanna stared at him, and then, as coldly as she could say, she said, "You are being executed for treason. On order of the king, I do sentence you to die. A guard will come and escort you to the courtyard." With that, she turned and walked to the door. But before she left, Seret called out, "Ask your good sister about her good father. She will tell you something interesting, I think." Joanna said nothing, but she walked out of the room. Briskly, she informed Kevin and Jerian and Jenna and the Red Cloaks. She walked out to the courtyard with Cersei and Tyrion, and then they watched as Seret was dragged out. He stumbled slightly, but nobody in the crowd said anything. They had all learned to remain silent on these matters. The block was put on the ground, and Seret was forced to kneel down and place his head on it. Joanna stepped forward and spoke. "Lord Jasper Seret, you are sentenced to death for treason, in the name of His Majesty, Aerys, second of his name, King of the Seven Kingdoms, Lord Protector of the Realm, and Defender of the Faith. I do hereby sentence you to death." The sword came down, and Seret's head rolled to the ground, stopping near the butcher, who picked it up and moved to place it on a spike. Joanna nodded to Kevin, who then took the children and walked away. Joanna looked at her good sister and whispered, "Might I have a word with you in my solar?" Jenna nodded, and the two of them walked to the solar in silence. Her good sister was wearing red and gold, but she looked pale. Something was wrong. Another pregnancy, no doubt. Joanna sat down, as did Jenna, and then Joanna spoke. "How are you feeling, Jenna?" Jenna laughed. "I am feeling sick. This babe has been causing me more trouble than any of the previous ones, and now I think Aemon has lost even more of his manhood than he had done before." Joanna raised an eyebrow, and Ainfrey was not the strongest of men, but even then, Jaina rarely criticized him like this. "What has he done?" she asked. Jaina snorted. "What hasn't he done? That man claims he wants to be his own man, but is constantly moving off to do whatever it is that his father is telling him to do. Now he's convinced that he now has to head over to the Riverlands to meet with some character who nobody has ever heard of, because his father has commanded him to. Even for a man, that was bad. However, it had provided her with an opening, and so Joanna took it. Before he was taken to the block, Seret told me that I should ask you about Aemon. He said that you'd have something interesting to tell me. She paused and then asked, "Do you—" Yana said nothing for a long moment, and then nodded. "Yes, actually. I mentioned this to Kevin before, but he said that it was nothing. But now, with Seret gone, and with Aemon acting increasingly oddly, I think that now is the right time to mention this. I think that Walder Frey is planning something with other lords, something that has more than a tinge of historical action about it." Joanna suspected that this might have something to do with the rat, the hawk, and the pig, but she decided not to say anything. She would rather let Jaina say what she needed to say. Jaina was silent, fiddling with the hem of her dress, and then she spoke. "I think that Walder Frey is plotting some sort of treason. I know that when Seret was brought in, Aemon looked as white as a sheet. I've never seen him look that way, and he kept muttering about how he had to speak with his father and how things were going to get a lot worse now, unless he acted. And now he's convinced he has to go to the Riverlands, and he will not tell me why." Jaina rarely sounded worried about Aemon. Indeed, Joanna often got the impression that her good sister hated her husband, and who could blame her? Aemon was weak and a fool. But this was different. There was genuine fear in Jaina's voice, and Joanna could not blame her. Did Aemon say anything else? Did he mention what else his father had done? Lord Walder is old man, but he is not a fool. He would have done something quite serious if it got Aemon worried, being that Aemon is quite slow. Joanna said. Jenna laughed. This is true, but well, I think that there have been other things. But Aemon does not tell me. And usually the man cannot keep his mouth shut. It all started when this whole thing with the Brotherhood started. I think I didn't say anything because I only noticed it when Sarah came. But I think that Walder Frey is mixed up with the rat, the hawk, and the pig. At the astonished look Joanna must have made, Jenna laughed. I am not foolish. I know that brown, gray, and silver are the colors of those three people, colors they made their own. I know that Aemon has always avoided brown paper, and now I think I know why. He does not want the association to be linked to him. Do you think Walder Frey is involved with the rat, the hawk, and the pig? Or do you think he is one of them? If so, how? He was only a child when the first instance of their appearance is noted, and he was fighting alongside Prince Daeron at the battle, Joanna said. She knew that for a fact, because Tywin had always said how Frey had held back during the battle, and then suddenly it made sense. You think he has been planning this for a very long time then? Why? The Freys are a prideful people and had suffered greatly during the Second Blackfire Rebellion, even though Walder's father gave medicines that Prince Rhaegal needed to combat some of the madness that plagued him. I think they have been wanting to bring down the throne for some time. They always supported those who would be against strengthening the crown's hold on things, and I think Walder is stepping up his plans now. I think that is why he wanted me married to Aemon, Gannon said. Joanna thought about it for a moment and then asked, Where is Aemon? Is he still here? Yes, Gannon replied immediately. He is not leaving until tomorrow. Make sure he does not leave tomorrow. We must ensure he never makes it to the Riverlands, for if he does, then he is lost to us, Joanna said. Gainsir nodded. I will do all I can to make sure he remains here, and I shall help you prevent whatever idiotic plan he has now. Joanna nodded. Good, thank you. You may go now. Janna got up and left, leaving Joanna to ponder how the actions of the past still echoed throughout the future. Summer had brought with it the full, scorching wrath of the sun and the heat. Windows were open. Servants were waving fans, but still it was damnably hot. Tywin could feel the sweat pooling on his face, and as he looked at the other members of the council, he knew they were feeling the heat the same as him, though the king seemed to be relishing it, smiling and laughing. That was a good sign. The king had too often, as of late, been serious and anxious. The death of his son, Prince Jack Harris, had really put him into a spiral, but he had recovered somewhat. Perhaps this time there might be a healthy male heir, and the dynasty would be truly secured. The king took a sip of wine and then spoke, stopping the chatter. My lords Bravus, the ever-growing concern, gnawing away at the chains we have placed around them. I would know whether we must consider preemptive action or whether the embargo continues to do its work. Tywin spoke then, knowing more about this than anyone else. Looking through the accounts later, the embargo continues to work well for us. Profits for the merchant guilds were up 20% on last year, with the greater exposure to Volantis and the cities further east, without Braavosi interference, really doing wonders for the economy. As for trade, closer to home, the Three Daughters and Pentos continue to demand more supplies from us, and so our profits are growing ever larger. The king looked very happy with that, and rightfully so. To bring Braavos down from the giant-sized pedestal that they always put themselves on was something to be proud of. The king, of course, would not be happy until Braavos was a burning ruin. But of course, doing so would disrupt the balance of power, and so for now, Tywin had managed to convince the king that keeping Braavos alive but crippled was for the best. The king took another sip of wine. As for the Braavosi themselves, how are they responding to all of this? I am surprised they have not sent one of their foolish little assassins to try and do something to prevent this. Tywin agreed with the king. The Iron Bank had been oddly quiet, considering he had seen the reports that stated that their net income was declining, that more and more of the merchants were slipping into an unknown state of poverty. Tywin looked at Ser Jaxares, the Master of Whispers, who replied, The Braavosi are facing tough times internally. The current Sea Lord is experiencing several challengers to his throne, and as such is spending more time trying to prevent those challengers from removing him from power. Even the first sword of Braavos has reduced himself to conspiring against his master. Tywin looked at the king and saw that the man was fiendishly happy with that. It also appears that the Iron Bank's board of advisors has begun fighting amongst itself. Much of its custom has dried up, and the cities and families that previously took loans with them have now completely refused to pay anything outstanding, citing the reasonable explanation that the bank cannot provide surety on their loans. Now that was something. Tywin suspected that this was one of the most grievous states that the Iron Bank had found itself in since its founding, and no doubt they would be unaccustomed to such harsh times. They would make a mistake. It seemed that the king was of the same opinion, for he said, would they collapse then? They have lost 6 major trading partners. Loras is not strong enough to force through anything to meet the demand they previously had. And on principle, the Iron Bank does not trade with Slaver's Bay, so then they must be close to collapse. There was a hint of something darker in the king's words that made Tywin pause for a second, but there was no noticeable change in the king himself, and so he put the thought to the back of his mind. The Iron Bank is most definitely close to collapse, sire, Sir Jaehaerys agreed. However, it is being propped up by the Sea Lord and by the more well-off within Braavos for the time being. The Braavos are trying to get the 3 daughters to start their fight about the disputed lands once more, as of right now. They have not been successful, but I am not sure how long the 3 cities will remain allies for, given their history. Tywin considered this and found that he agreed with Sir Jaehaerys, Lys, and Mer would always want more than what Tyrese was willing to give them. The countless strewn bodies across the disputed lands was proof of that. However, Tywin did not think that the 3 cities hated one another more than they hated Braavos. For a city that claimed to be neutral, the Iron Bank had certainly done enough to create enemies. He supposed that was always the way for those with money, or at least that was what that whore Ellen Rain had said before she had died. Tywin pushed that thought away and said, Sire, I think we should allow Braavos to struggle on for another moon or so before we move in for the kill. If we seize their assets on the coast, then they will be finished. We are already cutting them off from their fishing routes. Their ships are being hampered by our ships and those of our allies. If we take the coast, then they will be done. But why wait a moon or more to do that? The king asked. Why not get it done now when they are on their knees? Because when they are on their knees, they can still get up. However, in a moon or 2, they will be falling over. And when they start falling over, we can remove their legs from under them to ensure they never get up again. In a moon or 2, their economy will be stumbling into despair. Housing will become an issue. Food will be an issue. They will have nothing, Tywin said. He could tell that the king wanted to go another course. There was the flicker in Aerys' eyes that would always appear when he wanted to do something different to what he was being advised to do. It had appeared with Summerhall, and it had appeared when they were boys, and now here it was again. Yet he was surprised when Aerys said, Very well then, we shall give it 2 moons, and then after that Braavos will fall. Tywin was still not sure how he felt about the fall of Braavos, but he kept that thought to himself. It was clear to him that the king wanted Braavos to fall, and therefore there would be nothing stopping him from achieving that. Deciding that there were other matters that needed addressing, Tywin spoke. Your Majesty, there is another issue that is quite pressing. That is the issue of the land dispute between the Brackens and the Blackwoods. It appears that they have not reached a satisfactory conclusion to the dispute, despite numerous attempts to do so, and now it seems as though fighting is imminent. Tywin did not think there would actually be fighting between the 2. But you never knew with those 2 houses, and besides, he could tell the king was deeply interested. The king sat, took another sip of wine, and then spoke. What is this dispute about again? Is it the hill boundary or some other boundary? Tywin looked down at his notes. It is about the boundary between the land road and the southern edge. Bracken claims that that boundary should be moved several miles southwards, as right now it cuts through several forests where there is good game. Whilst Blackwood argues against that, stating that the boundary is perfectly fine where it is, and that Bracken merely wants to move it so that he can meet his whores. The king roared with laughter at that, his chest shaking with the effort. The council laughed with him and then stopped when he did. Well, is that the reason? Tywin smiled. It was just like his friend to find something scandalous in the pressing issues of the time. Tywin took a moment to think. He had spoken briefly with both men, and though Bracken insisted that was not the reason, Blackwood said he had had it from Bracken's wife that it was, and Tywin had spoken to the wife, and she had said something along the lines of the same. I have done some reading into this situation, and from what I can tell, Your Majesty, is that the boundary was set during the reign of King Daeron the Good, when Brynden Rivers was advising the king. The boundary does cut into what has traditionally been Bracken patrimony, but over time the forests have been claimed by neither side and have been ignored. Indeed, the Rygers had in the past settled there to hunt and take up contracts raiding into either Bracken or Blackwood land depending on who was paying them. The king snorted. So, really the land belongs to the Rygers then, does it? Tywin thought about it for a moment and said, in a manner of speaking, yes, it does, sire. The king nodded, his eyes becoming hard and then going milky. Very well, write to Ryger. Tell him to come to court to present evidence on why he should not be turned out of the forest. If he gives a satisfactory answer, then he will get the forest. Tywin was not surprised that this was the course of action that the king had chosen. Earth might be kin to the Blackwoods, but he hated them and the Brackens in equal measure and was sure to spite them both. Tywin made a note of what the king had said, and then listened as Lord Chelstead spoke. Sire, whilst I am sure your decision is the right one, do you not think it is asking for trouble to give the forest to an unknown house that so far has played the role of marauders and sellswords and nothing else? Chelstead was married to a Bracken, or had a Bracken for a mother, if Tywin remembered correctly, and so he hid a smirk behind his cup. The king glared at Chelstead, causing the other man to quail. Bracken and Blackwood have been fighting over some piece of land forever. I will not allow their quarrels to continue any more than I would allow your quarrel with Darkland to continue. Chelstead had the sense to blush at that. Rogier might be nothing more than a sellsword, as might his entire family. But they have paid their taxes, they have served their king during times of war, and now they are owed something. I will give them this forest and ensure they act as a buffer between two houses that should really know better. Chelstead bowed his head in acknowledgement of this, though Tywin suspected that there would not be an end to this. The king stood then, and so they all stood up. I am going to retire to my rooms. Tywin, I wish to see you once the meeting is over. The king pushed the chair back and walked out of the room. Once he was gone, they all sat down, and as expected, Chelstead spoke. The king will cause a war between Bracken and Blackwood if he keeps going like this. Ryger is nothing more than a sellsword, and the forests that Bracken is on about are valuable. That is the reason Ryger has not been ridden off yet, Chelstead said. Tywin looked at Chelstead and said, the king has made his mind up. Carlton, I hope you are not considering challenging His Majesty's choice. That would not end well for Chelstead or his family. It appeared Carlton knew that as well, for he swallowed, then quickly said, of course not. I would never think to do that. I will need to look through the accounts again to make sure Rager is a decent man. Tywin looked at Petzl, who mouthed the word Bracken to him, and Tywin nodded in acknowledgement of that. So, there was an interest there. He turned to Staunton. Lord Staunton, there have been complaints coming in about the lack of actual order within your area of the Crown Lands. That does not look well for a Master of Laws. Would you care to explain how this has happened? Staunton visibly paled. I have been trying to sort the issue out, but have not had the success I would have liked. Tywin snorted, not convinced by the response whatsoever. He knew Staunton and knew him to be a man who took the word no as well as a whoremonger did. Be truthful, Simon. You are the Master of Laws, with the full force of the king behind you. So, tell us, why are you not enforcing the law as it should be? Why are there beggars roaming the land of Rook's Rest, and why are there men and women being raped by the dozen? What are you trying to prove? He had his suspicions about Staunton, always had done. There was something about the man that just smacked of something wrong, of something rotten. What it was he did not fully know, but it was there. Regardless, he waited for Staunton to respond, and when he did, he gave the expected answer, which only served to heighten Tywin's suspicion of him. You are right, my Lord Hand. I will ensure that this mistake is not done again. Tywin decided not to press that matter, and so nodded. He then turned his attention to another matter. Have you found someone to replace Sir Marlon as Justice of the Blue Fork? The Blue Fork was a very fertile region, and a profitable one to boot, which made ensuring law and order there a top priority. Sir Marlon had died on duty. He had been a firm hand, someone who had served since the time of King Aegon the Fortunate, and so was well used to donning armor to handle the citizens of the Blue Fork. His death was a great blow. Lord Staunton replied in a hesitant manner, I have selected 3 candidates to replace him. One is well known to us all. His name is Sir Garland Peake, a decent man and one who has a firm record on justice. The other 2 are unknown to most here, but they are good men with reasonable records. Put Sir Garland in the role. The other two are not ready for such a demanding job, Tywin said instantly. Lord Staunton nodded, and then Tywin said, "This meeting is at an end." He knew there were other things that needed to be discussed, but he could handle that on the morrow. For now he needed to speak to the king about what he had learned. They stood, nodded to one another, and walked out of the room. The Red Cloaks followed him through the corridors, past paintings of dragons and past Targaryens, past courtiers who were drinking and making merry, and past countless others. Tywin came to the king's chambers, nodded to Sir Khaled and Sir Barristan, who were guarding the room, and entered. He bowed before the king and took the seat opposite him. There was a moment of silence, and Tywin noticed Sir Geralt's hulking figure in the background. "What word has there been of what Lord Frey has been doing?" the king asked immediately. "He has been complaining constantly to anyone and everyone. He wrote to me several times a week before giving up. He wanted his son back at the Twins, but he would not say why. He refuses to meet, stating he has no reason to. In short, he is trying desperately to act the outraged lord, when everything we have found suggests he has been funding the little gatherings near Castamere," Tywin said, barely able to hide his disgust. The king nodded. "What reason would he have for doing this, though?" "I do not understand. His house is one of the richest within Westeros, especially in the Riverlands. Why would he want to fund people whose very existence is against his?" Tywin had spent a long time thinking about this very issue. He had known Walder Frey since he had been a child, and he had never liked the man. He had found him grasping and ambitious and somewhat of a fool. A clever one, but a fool nonetheless. I suppose he harbors resentment for what happened during the Second Blackfire Rebellion. Yet his father was one of the people who informed Bloodraven of what was going to take place, so I cannot see how he would hold a problem there. I think he is doing this out of sheer opportunism, hoping to make something out of nothing. He has not said anything to the people I have sent to question him, and Aemon is saying nothing. The king's chest expanded as he sighed. "Do you think that this could be a misdirection?" "Walder Frey does not strike me as the sort of person to do anything without an ironclad guarantee. He has lived for a long time, and he continues to produce children. Perhaps one of them has begun considering where they can make their fortune, and he is trying to protect them." Tywin considered this. A reasonable suggestion. Frey is known to value family, though he has many offspring. I am not sure how well he knows all of them. If Aemon would just talk, we might be able to sort this whole thing out without needing to resort to other methods. The king hummed. "I think we shall need to press him. I do not want anyone else knowing of this, for it will make us look weak if they find out that we do not know. I want the names of the 3 main leaders before this year is out." "And you shall have them, your majesty," Tywin said. The king nodded and motioned for him to leave. Tywin got up and walked out of the room, making a slow progress back to the Tower of the Hand, his mind racing with possibilities. The night was dark, the torches were burning, brightly enough to ensure that people could see, but not enough to allow them any access to anything that he did not want them to see. Jonas had learned long ago that it was better to have partial light than full darkness or brightness. There were things a man could do in the partial light that he just could not do in the light or dark properly. Right now, he simply wanted to tear his hair out and scream. The Blackwoods were always going to be a problem. He had long ago accepted that, but this was something else altogether. He scratched at his eye and sighed. "Well," he asked, "how bad is it?" Meisterpool took a look at the paper and then said, "The Blackwoods have sided with the Rygers properly, my lord, and they are now raiding into the southern edges of the Hanging Forest. The people of the forest are growing desperate." Jonas rubbed a hand over where he felt as though there was a developing ache. "And how many men do we have currently patrolling the area?" This had been a constant fixture of his life since he could remember, fighting the Blackwoods, be it either with words or with swords. There had been a time when he had been friends with Tydos Blackwood, but that time was long gone now. 20 years dead, if he remembered correctly. Maester Poole looked at the notes again and said, "Around 30 men patrolling the boundary, but Sir Harris reports that he thinks it might not be enough." Geranace wanted to yell. Sir Harris was an old git of a man who had nothing but bad things to say about anything and everything. Geranace really wondered what his father had seen in him all those years ago, and the more he thought about it, the more he wondered what he continued to see in him. Sir Harris continually thinks that we need more men patrolling the area. Personally, I am starting to think he wants to ignore the evident fact that he is an old man whose grip on his men is failing. Tell me, did he ever deal with those men who stepped over the line and actually raped those women? Daenerys might not like the Blackwoods, but he would not tolerate the rape of innocent women, even if they were heathen-worshipping women. Maester Poole smirked. He had not the last time I asked. But fear not, my lord, Sir Davos is making sure that those things are being taken care of. Janos nodded. Sir Davos would always make sure that the mess Sir Varys left behind was cleared up. That was why Janos kept him, despite the fact that Davos was nearly blind in both eyes and had a problem with drink. He was a damned good soldier. Janos took a moment, and then turned to the other man in the room with them. Harold, what do you make of all of this? Do we have enough food and supplies to see through another year of fighting? Janos did not want to fight for another year. He knew that the moment the fighting stopped, if it stopped next year, that things would be bad. The crown would not appreciate that. Harold Rivers was his bastard brother, a man known for his fiery temper and his precision with numbers. It was why, despite the protestations of his mother and his wife, Janos had employed him as his steward for the past 5 years, and why their father had kept him around as well. Harold took a moment to consider the question, his face scrunched in concentration. The scar he had gotten whilst fighting the Blackwoods 5 years ago, shining in the dim light. Eventually he spoke. I think that we need to focus more on the leaving hills than the hanging forest. The hanging forest will always be a problem, but it is one we can manage. Should the Blackwoods get it into their heads to try something on the leaving hills, then we are finished. They can send men through the passages and into the land proper, and we will have nothing to stop them with. So, would you suggest diverting resources from the hanging forest to the hills then? And if so, where does that leave us supply-wise? Janos asked. He had a rough idea of where it left them, but he was not sure whether he truly wanted to have his own worst fears confirmed. Harold did not hold back, as Janos had come to expect of his brother. We would just about be managing to keep everything together. There would be areas where we would enter the red, we are running out of bread, and salt, but we have enough meat for another 5 moons, and another water for 8 moons. We have enough gold to purchase bread and salt, though, but not enough to continue paying the troops for another 8 moons. If we move toward the hills instead of the forest, we might ease up on burdening our resources, and find enough to extract something of worth from the mines. Jameson nodded. He had always known that sooner or later the mines would come into play. He had just hoped that they would be able to avoid using them this early. He did not think his allies would appreciate that. Very well. Move resources to the hills then. He would need to move out and deal with Blackwood first himself as well. Where is Blackwood in all of this? What is that fool doing? Blackwood has been communicating with his allies in the north and the east. He is doing all he can to paint himself as the victim here, my lord. In some cases, he is succeeding. Lord Roose has promised him aid, but in others he is being ignored. Lord Stark has refused to get involved, Maester Poole said. He will venture out to fight should he think that would win him the day. Janos nodded. Very well. Is my visitor here? He felt slightly nervous about this, and he did not know why. It was not as if he was some sort of simple child anymore to be impressed by the aura of the man. Still, there was something there. Yes, shall I show him in? Poole asked. Do so, and I want both of you here as well. Jornu said he did not trust the man, even if he might be an ally. Poole bowed and straightened before walking out and returning a few moments later with a man dressed in dark leathers, a brown hawk on his tunic. Lord Janos. The man said, bowing. I hope you are well. Well enough. What did your father want? Janos asked. Walder Rivers smirked, a smirk that constantly made Janos feel scared as if he was a little child again, and not the lord of an old and powerful house, one that was far older and more respected than House Frey. He wanted to make sure that you had not forgotten the deal you had made with him. Janos stiffened. The deal? It would always come back to that fucking deal. Janos sometimes wondered why he had made that deal. He had 3 daughters who he loved very much, but there were times when he wondered whether the 7 were cursing him for some sin committed in his youth. He had no son to inherit his titles, and now there was all sorts of trouble that might be coming from this fucking deal. It was through gritted teeth that he said, I remember the deal just fine. You did not need to come all this way, to make sure of that. Some might say you have wasted your time. Walder Rivers' smirk widened. Oh, I would not say that. You see, the crown has started watching my father and his heirs. Every move they make is reported to the king, and as such, his movements have been restricted, but mine have not been. and so I have come here to discuss the deal once more. A stir of movement to his side made him aware of Maester Poole's movements. Janos held up a hand. He did not want or need some sort of incident being caused now. Instead, he forced himself to push down the anger that was growing within him, and asked, "And what elements of the deal do you wish to discuss?" To be clear, it is you and not your father who wishes to discuss this deal. It was crucially important that got clarification on that point. If it was Rivers who wanted to discuss the deal and make a new one, then Bracken could force more favorable terms on him and then run roughshod over Frey at a later date. But if it was Frey himself who wanted to discuss the deal, then Bracken knew something was approaching. "I am acting with my father's blessing," Rivers said. That was deliberately vague and could have meant anything. Janos pushed down the urge to snarl. "Very well, go on," Janos stated. Rivers' mouth straightened. He was talking business now. The taunting would not be present. "Well, first of all, we wish for you to move your troops from the Hanging Forest to the Teats. Move the troops there and we shall provide better cover than we can now." There were free interests near the Teats, and a daughter or a son of Walder Frey lived there as well, paying an annual tribute to Janos. No wonder Rivers had come. This child of Frey's was one of his favorites. Moving my men there would leave my right side exposed. I do not know if you have been kept informed of how this conflict is going, but the Blackwoods are pushing hard on the right. They are not leaving anything unchecked. The Blackwoods are going to be changing course soon enough. We've had it on good authority that they will be marching toward the Teats, Rivers said. Belatedly, Jonas remembered that there was a Blackwood who was married to one of Frey's numerous children. Perhaps this was properly solid evidence then. And if I move my men to the Teats, there would only be 30 moving there. The rest are currently defending other passageways. What do you know about the Rosies promising support to the Blackwoods? Janos asked. That is a bluff. Jan Royce does not like Titus Blackwood, and does not care enough about the old gods to ever get involved in such a conflict as this. Besides, Stark has decided not to get involved. Therefore, none of the other First Men houses will ally with Blackwood unless you are foolish enough to attack one of their godswoods. Rivers responded, Then it is a good thing I am not a fool then. Jonu said, he might consider worshippers of the old gods' heathens deserving of death, but he would not attack a godswood. He had too much respect for the places, a respect his mother had instilled in him from a young age. He knew Harold did not share his views, but Harold could suck an egg. He was a bastard, not the Lord. What else? Jonas pressed. He knew that there would be more. There always was with the Freys. Rivers smiled. When the time is right, you will do as agreed, and raise your banner in rebellion against the crown. The time is fast approaching when the true lords of the Seven Kingdoms will come together and break the back of the Iron Throne, restoring order to how it was before. Jurses hesitated in his agreement here. He firmly believed that the best way to get a resolution that was favorable to his family was by reducing the power of the crown. But going as far as Frey and his associates wanted, that was something he was not sure about. He thought through it some more, thought about the guarantee of his daughter ascending the Bracken throne, and decided to nod. Very well. And when does your Lord Father believe the time will be right? In a year, the tension between the king and his hand is growing ever more obvious. They will not be able to hold on for much longer, Rivers said. Bracken felt a momentary chill, and then nodded. Very well. Anything else? Rivers shook his head and said, I must take my leave. There are others I must speak to. With that, he stood and walked out of the room. Bracken watched him leave and waited until he had received confirmation that the man had left before he turned to Poole and Harold and asked them, What do you think? I think he is lying, Harold said immediately. Jonas gestured for his advisors to move more in front of him, and when they had done that, asked, What makes you say so? His brother straightened. There's something about his manner that seems off. His father and brothers are being watched, but somehow he seems less concerned about that than ensuring he made his way down here to discuss some deal with you. It does not fit. James Saints nodded, and yet we have struck our deal with them, and if the Blackwoods are truly going to be alone in this fight, they will head for the Teats. It is what they would do, after all. Go for the Teats, the only part of a woman Titus Blackwood has ever seen. Harold grinned at that, but his voice was still incredibly serious as he replied, My lord, begging your pardon, but moving to the Teats when the Rygers are now firmly allied with the Blackwoods would be madness. It makes more sense, in my opinion, to move the men from the Hanging Forest to the hills. That way the mines are protected. Junius acknowledged that with a grunt. True enough, and yet we are allies with the Freys now. We cannot exactly leave them to rot, even if that is what I would like to do. It was true, there was a certain art to this diplomacy business that he had slowly begun to learn. The teats are important as well for symbolic reasons, if nothing more. Perhaps speaking with some of the lesser lords near these areas could help settle the problem. Maester Poole asked, "What do you mean?" Janos replied, "Send word to Vipren and to Piper and others. Those we know would be more amenable to fighting alongside us against the Blackwoods, and to the minor knights with men. Send them toward the Teats, offer them the loot of the Blackwood lands, and move from there. They would be foolish to not take that offer up." Maester Poole stated. Janesaw considered the suggestion, considering how inactive Hoster Tully had been in handling the current dispute. It could be a smart solution. After all, Tully had always favored Blackwood more in their disputes, and so now would be the best opportunity to get back at the man as well. It was not like Tully had made allies out of the men his father had previously alienated. He looked at Harold and his brother nodded. "I think it would make the most sense. We must focus on protecting the hills. Leave the teats to others and cause Hoster Tully to sweat." Janos nodded. "Very well, send word tonight." There was a brief pause, and then he said, "You may retire for the night." The two men bowed and walked out of the room. Janos remained sitting where he was. Tiredness seeped into his bones. He did not know how much longer he could go without something major happening. This war had gone on for a long time. That the Crown had allowed it to become a properly armed conflict did a lot of arouse his suspicions. He did not think this was something Tywin Lannister would do. Janos knew Lannister. He was clever, but not this clever. This sounded more like something a son of Jaehaerys the Frail would do. And as such, Janos was very much uncertain of how to handle everything. As he rubbed the sleep from his eyes, he decided it would do him no good to remain here. He was about to stand up when a guard walked in. "What?" he demanded tiredly. The guard looked scared. "There is someone here to see you, my lord. At this hour, tell them I will see them tomorrow," Janos replied briskly. Before the guard could respond, another figure stepped into view. In the dim light, Janos could not quite make out their face, but there was a familiar smell about them. "I do not think you would want to do that," the voice said. Janos felt himself go cold all over. "Leave us," he said to the guard. The guard bowed and hurried out. He turned back to the new man and said, "I must be a popular member now, considering I have been visited by another high-ranking official." The man did not come into view, but the smell grew stronger, and Janos felt as if he was going to gag. "Do not flatter yourself. I have come with word from our master." Janos stiffened. This was not good. "What does he want?" "I have done everything he has asked of me. I cannot do more, not without raising proper suspicion. He wants you to continue as you are, and he wants you to take money from Fry and ensure it makes it safely across the sea," the figure said, his voice sounding distant, despite the fact that Janos could see him in the pale light. "He wants me to rob Frey? Why? I thought things had been sorted there?" Janos asked, hating how nervous he sounded. "Just do it, and do it quickly. Walder Rivers will not make it to his next destination. You are to have men prepared waiting for him to fall," the figure said. "Where is he going?" Janos asked. "Old Stones, to meet the old witch. He will never make it there. You are to make sure that your men take the riches he has on his person. Do you understand?" the voice asked. "I do. I will not fail," Janos said, a cold sweat breaking out on his face. "Good," the figure said. Silence fell, and a door slammed shut. Janos slumped onto his chair, knowing he would not get any sleep now. Not with the smell of pig in his nostrils.
Thank you for listening to the story. If you enjoyed this reimagined story and audiobook style presentation, feel free to like and subscribe for more content like this. New stories and alternate scenarios are updated regularly. Now see you in the next video.